Hello, and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. And here is Takota Coen, who is my special guest for today. Welcome, Takota. I was going to call you Coen.
Happy to be here, Beth.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on again, short notice for the second time. And we were getting some momentum learning from you. The folks that I farm with were actually really thrilled about the last interview. So we're going to pick up a little bit where we left off. And hello, Baptized in Fire. Nice to see you. I did share a Rockfin link. There might be some confusion with the Rockfin link because there was two identical streams there, which often happens, a little glitch there in their world. But welcome, everyone. And do say hi in the chat. I do have Rockfin going. I think we're short a channel here. I'm live on Facebook and YouTube and X and Rumble. And it looks like Vigilante TV. What's missing? I can't remember. All of these streams get uploaded to my podcast channel after the fact, so you can also catch them as audios and downloads. And I think we're going to get started. I will reintroduce Takota for anyone that is not familiar with him. I do recommend going to check out our first interview, and I think I have a link handy here. So it's all about life supporting systems, especially when we live in a death cult that really doesn't support life or doesn't promote supporting life, which is tricky because we become so incredibly indoctrinated by death, and we feel it to be a real and important part of our experience. And it is, but for different reasons, of course. So yeah, if you're not familiar with Takota, he is a wonderful, I'm proud to call him a fellow Canadian, which is lovely. He was born and raised on a 250-acre regenerative farm in Alberta, Canada. In 2012, he quit his career as a carpenter when he realized that humanity was heading towards a dystopian nightmare, and dedicated his life to help change that trajectory. That is, to me, a sign of sacred purpose. When you feel compelled, you get knowledge, and you know other people need to have that knowledge, and then it becomes wind in your sails as you move forward. I think we can see the evidence of that. And in the years since he realized the best way to fight with nefarious agents destroying our world is not by pandemoniums, petitions, or pouting, but by ending our dependency on the systems that keep us sick, broke, and enslaved. He's a farmer, author, and co-founder of Building Your Homestead, a company whose mission is to help others peacefully exit the increasing tyranny of our world and start building a parallel economy, one homestead at a time. You can find out more about their homestead design services, mentorships, and free resources at www.buildingyourhomestead.com. That's there in the banner, and I'm going to also share it in the chat so you guys can click right on it. And there's a number of social links as well, so you can find him on Instagram and YouTube and Red Circle, which I actually don't even know. So I'll share those as we go along in the chat today. And today we were going to focus specifically on raising animals, and that's due to some diet changes over the past couple of years that have been much more focused on animal protein, although not exclusively, and also growing grains. What's that like as a small scale farmer? Is it even possible? Is it realistic? Some people would say that grains aren't supposed to be in our diet at all because they are only a product of the intensive agriculture that we know more so in our modern lives. But first, we're going to jump in. Thank you so much for being here, Takota. It's really great to have you.
Oh, I'm pumped. Let's go.
Right on, right on. Yeah. So first, we're going to focus on raising animals for meat. And so I have some questions from the people that I work with. And no doubt, is there anything that you want to say about it off the top? That is it something that, say, a transition from primarily growing food to raising livestock? Is there a big mindset shift that you'd need to have in place?
Yeah, I think maybe I have to stop. I'll share my screen here, and I want to show one of the images from my book. Let me know when that's up there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so this is a framework that I call the order of operations. It's also known as the scale of permanence in different design frameworks. They've got similar layouts, but basically it's this idea that there are different components of any farm or homestead, and they are arranged hierarchically, not in order of importance, but in order of things that are hardest to change to things that are easiest to change, or things that take the most amount of energy or the longest amount of time to change, that are the quickest and easiest. And so the way that I lay that framework out is it starts with geography, then climate, then water, then access, then structures, fencing, flora, fauna, business, technology, and soil. And again, I want to stress this is not importance. This is in order of in difficulty to change, but also the things that are at the higher on this order of operations, they're more influential for things that are further towards the bottom. So the reason I want to bring that up is fauna or animals is pretty near the bottom, and the reason for that is they take a lot of or it's very easy to go out and buy an animal, and you can buy a whole herd of cows in a weekend. I've had clients do that, but if you don't have these other components of your farm set up, it'll just be an absolute disaster. And so while animals are absolutely critical to a homestead, they are critical to diet, to regenerating soils. They're so amazing, as we're going to talk about. Everyone gets really excited, and a big mistake I see a lot of people make is they go out and they buy animals before they have the flora or the plant systems, the fencing, the structures, their access, their water systems set up. And so, like, for example, on my new homestead property, which I've been here for 2 years now, I don't have animals. I had chickens this year, but I don't have my dairy cows and pigs here yet. They're still over at our main farm. And the reason is because I'm still building all these other systems, because I've made enough mistakes myself, and I've seen enough clients do it as well, that it's just not worth it to get larger animals before you're ready. So I think that's the first thing I like to start it off with, is while we're going to be talking about animals today and how amazing they are, I really don't recommend jumping into it before you're ready.
Yeah, though that's really good. And could we go into more detail about that? Like what needs to be in place before you just go and get animals? It's so funny. Like, you're almost reading my mind. I'm like, let's just go get cows.
Yeah. So I mean, like at a minimum, again, it depends on what kind of animals. If it's just generally the smaller the animal, the less infrastructure you need, and the larger the animal, the more. But I would say say your larger kind of grazing animals, cattle, milk cows, sheep, goats, at a minimum, you want really good perimeter fencing. You want some kind of I would call it like a holding pen, or a corral, or a staging area, which when you drop the animals off, or if you need to do any kind of intensive management or load them onto a trailer, or if there's an emergency, you want to have something like a physical barrier that they can't break out of. Electric fence is an amazing tool. It's super cost effective, but if you don't have, like, it's electric fence is a psychological barrier. It's not a physical barrier. And so if you have animals that aren't used to you and there's an emergency and you need to handle them, the electric fence won't work for that situation. So having some kind of it doesn't need to be permanent. It can be portable panels, but a physical barrier that when you drop the animals off, they can get acclimatized. I don't know how many clients I've had go out and buy, a couple 60-pound pigs, and they bring them home in their trailer or in the back of the truck or whatever, and they have this beautiful electric pen set up, and they drop them off, and the pigs immediately bolt, and they're never seen again, or it's a 5-day wild goose chase through the bush. And so having that, like a physical thing where you can drop them off, they can get used to you, or they can't run away, but they're also safe. And then ideally some kind of, I would say, automatic water, especially in our climate where we have really freezing, 6 months of our season is the ground freezes, 6 feet down, 8 feet down. You don't want to be carrying 5-gallon buckets. You can do it. I have many clients who have, but once you get a frost-free hydrant and an automatic livestock water, it is such a game changer. And they don't cost a lot of money. That's the thing, is like all of these infrastructures are really just a few $1,000s to get the right thing. But it takes time to figure out where you're going to put that, because some of them are permanent, and that's where the design comes in and everything else, which is why I've got that order of operations, because it can be really complicated. But those would be some of the things I would look at, is essentially a good water system, some kind of structure that you can hold them in, and they can get shelter from. Then you want, really good perimeter fencing at a minimum, so that if they do escape from their, electric fencing paddocks, they're not going to go anywhere, or they're going to be contained to your property. And then the other thing I would also say is I've got something that I call I think it's the six B's. I think it's been a while since I said it, but it's so buildings, babies, brides, bushes, businesses, and beasts. And so typically when people start homesteading, they're newly married, they've got a new kid, they're building some kind of a house or a lot of infrastructure on their property, they're starting a brand new business, they're planting a bunch of trees, and they want to get 3 different kinds of animals, and everything just falls apart. So what I like to say is, of those 6 B's, pick 1 or 2 a year. And that might sound extreme, but it's so much of this stuff is like when you slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and you'll actually get to where you want to go faster if you go slow. And it's counterintuitive, but if you are making, so everyone's heard the idea that you can't learn if you don't make mistakes, but if you make mistakes so fast that you can't actually learn from them and integrate from them, like if you're just in a whirlwind of chaos, you can't learn from that, and your nervous system just shuts down, and people get stressed. And I know a lot of couples that have gone through separations and things like that, because they just did they were on the same page, they want to do the same stuff, but it was just too much stuff too fast, and shit goes south. I've done it myself. When I first moved back to the farm, I did probably 4 or 5 of those B's all in the same year, and it wasn't fun. Everything blew up. And so yeah, that would be another component of terms of like, what do you need to have in place, is like, make sure that you're not taking on too much of these other things in your life. Because when you get a new animal that you're not familiar with, like, I don't mean like, if you've already got 10 cows and you're buying another one, that's fine. But if you've only had dogs and cats your whole life, and then you want to get chickens and then pigs and then dairy cows and sheep, each one of those animals is a completely different species. They're a completely different animal, pardon the pun. And you need to take time. You can't learn that stuff in a book or watching videos. You need to take time to lean on a fence post and just watch them. See what they're doing when they're happy, when they're not content, when they're stressed, when they're just what their habitat or habits are, when they're grazing or when they're eating or when they're fighting with each other. And if you don't have that time in your life to really, build that connection and time with them, you're setting yourself at a disadvantage. And then that's where, as we talked about in the last podcast, kind of drudgery is punishment for stupidity. It starts to suck, and then there's this downward spiral where work is a form of pollution, and pollution creates more work. And so, or another way to say it is, every element on your property has needs and yields. Whether it's an animal, a plant, or a structure, it needs something from you, and it gives something to you. and you yourself have needs and yields as well. This is a framework in permaculture. And so if you don't have time to understand what each element's or each animal's needs and yields are for your system, then two things will either happen. One is there will be a surplus of yield, which creates pollution. So that there's too much manure building up. There's too many eggs. There's too much milk. There's too much meat, or there's too much animal impact in a certain area, or they're getting out and they're digging up your garden. All those things that animals can do, producing meat, milk, fiber, fertilizer, digging, tilling, grazing, predator, those are all yields. But if you can't put them to productive use, they become a pollution. And then the animals themselves, or any element, they need things from you. They need water, they need shelter, they need fencing, they need protection, they need other animals, they need sometimes really specific things like salt or dust baths or grit, and if they can't get those things themselves from the system, then you have to do work to help them get it, which then it becomes this downward spiral of just work and pollution and work and pollution. And so, like, taking the time to really immerse yourself in these ecosystems and understanding that 1 + 1 isn't 2, it's synergistic, it's greater than the sum of its parts. Adding in one extra animal can change everything in the system. And everyone's seen this, like, right? You could live your whole life with your dog, but if it's never seen another dog or a cat before, as soon as it sees, it turns into a completely different animal and it behaves totally differently.
Right.
So I say that to really stress this, and I can't stress it enough, because this is probably the biggest mistake that I see people make, is they get animals too many too soon, and before they're ready, and they actually become a massive drain on your quality of life. They become a drain on the land. So it's like all the things that you wanted them to do, they do the opposite, and you're fighting them. So really being deliberate with this, and if possible, like working on someone else's farm, getting some experience, like hands-on, not just watching videos or reading books. And I also don't want to, scare people into, like, don't do it at all. But if you're in a good place, if you've got good finances, if you've got decent infrastructure, and you're not starting a business, getting married, having kids, planting trees, building a new house, and all you're doing is you're just going to bring a new animal, absolutely go for it. But carve out that time to really learn, because there's no substitute for that, and it will pay dividends. Because once you learn, I mean, if folks have seen some of the videos on my YouTube channel, I can feed 30 pigs, milk 2 or 3 cows, and manage 150 chickens in like an hour a day. And like I've got a video of me doing chores, doing all those things as I'm giving a tour of the farm. Once you've got those systems up, it's effortless and it's fun and it's incredibly productive. So basically, I'd say I have a gym membership that more than pays my mortgage. I work out for an hour a day. It provides all my food, and it generates more than enough income to pay for the mortgage.
Amazing.
Now, if you don't have those systems in place, and if you haven't spent the time understanding what pigs want and what chickens want and what cows want, it's chaos, and you'll spend 10 hours a day. I have clients that I've worked with who's basically their entire day is just looking after, a fraction of the animals that I have, because they don't have the infrastructure for it. And if they didn't do that work, it would result in massive pollution, animals dying, getting sick, all these other things. But instead, I've got the infrastructure, and in my case, I had to rebuild my infrastructure like 6 times to get it right. Thankfully, I've got plans of how I did it, and a lot of that stuff on our website or my YouTube channel, so that folks don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to designing the perfect milking system. But there's still going to be a learning experience that folks are going to have to go through when they're getting these animals. I think that'd be the first place I would start. Is they are such an essential component to a homestead, but if you get it wrong, it's a disaster.
There you go. I'm scared now. But that's good, right? You want to have your eyes open. I'm just curious about the fence. Uh,
Yeah.
so when they're panicked, they will bust through an electric fence. That's not going to hold them, right? Because it's not a physical barrier.
No, not. I mean, some animals it will, but it depends on how, how stressed they are. But like, yeah, pigs, absolutely not. Sheep, no. A dairy cow that's been trained to it, maybe. But if they're really pushed, they'll go right through it. Versus if they're in a corral, and I've even had some cows here that are, again, I could hand milk almost all of our beef cows. Like that's how tame they are. And yet when we're handling them, sometimes one of them gets spooked. I've seen them jump a 6-foot fence, like a 1,500-1,600 pound cow. That's, they're incredible animals. And so you just don't want to have that that happen. And again, I'm not saying you need to build, the a crazy fortress, and like we actually don't even have really a functional squeeze chute on our farm, even though we have, this year we calved 20 head. We don't have crazy handling systems that
A
cost.
squeeze chute, meaning like to force them in a certain direction?
No, a squeeze chute is it's like it's a steel cage that if you need to, like, most people use them to like brand or tag or vaccinate, or if they need to like deal with their hooves or anything like that, do anything with the animal, you put them into this squeeze chute. Their head goes through a gate, it holds their head, and then they're kind of immobilized so that they can't hurt you or hurt themselves.
Right.
And then that's part of like generally like a chute that you get a whole bunch of them kind of in the chute and you move them through one at a time. Again, this is where most farms, they're running their animals through those chutes several times a year. For us, it's like a $500, just an emergency kind of piece of junk that if we use it maybe once a year on one animal, if they get hurt or something and we need to look at them. But so I'm not saying you need to have those kinds of systems. I just mean some kind of a pen. And these could be those click together metal panels you can get at hardware or farm stores. Those are really handy because as you start to learn and grow, they're modular, so you can add more on, or you can make pens out of them. Ideally, you'd have, in an ideal world, you'd have your whole farm designed out similar to, let me share my screen again here.
Sure.
So,
and I don't want to interrupt, but there's a question about type 1 mistakes.
Yeah, so it's a concept in permaculture. They're called type 1 errors, and it's basically it's any error that can cause like loss of life or loss of property that you couldn't bounce back from. So it's like building a dam, like really, really risky situations that might lead to ruin. So like building a dam above your house that might break and wash your house out, or I would say, like a type 1 situation would be like getting animals without proper handling systems. Like I've been around animals my whole life. Stop my sharing that. And I'm very good with them, but I've been in situations where like just a freak thing, and they turn on you, or they're scared, or shit can go south really fast. These animals are incredibly powerful. Even a pig, like a sow, if she's given birth, she can be the friendliest sow in the world. You can rub her belly. She can be your best friend. When those birthing instincts kick in, and if you're in her pen and a piglet squeaks the wrong way, even if you had nothing to do with it, she could tear your face off, like, because that's her instinct, even though she might have been the one to step on the piglet. And so, that I think that is a really great question, is that these, to really drive home how serious this is, people die every year from animals. Even like sheep, like I don't have a lot of experience with sheep, but I know people who have rams, and like they've just about, I don't know a person or anyone who's been killed by a sheep, but I've seen people get hit by them, like when they ram them, and they'll just turn their back for a second, and it can almost break your spine or cause serious damage. So yeah, you just don't want to mess around with stuff, especially if you've got kids, or people who don't have. Like, it's funny, a friend of mine once, this is years ago, like when you raise around animals, like for cows, for example, every animal has a flight zone. And so if you're a certain distance away, they don't really care about you. But if you take one step into what's known as their flight zone, they basically take one step away. And you think of it like two magnets. And some animals have a very tight flight zone. Some of them is like buffalo, it's like a kilometer away. And so, but if you're not aware of that and you're walking through a herd and they're in like a contained area, there's a way you can walk through, or even like they're quite tight and you're well within their flight zone, but you can walk through them safely. But for someone who doesn't know how to read animals, they don't realize a cow can kick, kind of 5 to 6 feet up. They can just about take your face off. And I've had friends even on our farm do it, and it's crazy because we'll do tours every once in a while, and some people just have no sense. They'll just get out of their car and go walk into the pen with the bull, even though they're on someone else's property. And so, yeah, like they're wonderful animals, but you gotta know how to read them, and that takes time to kind of understand what those boundaries are and what's safe, and to you can read a book on low livestock handling techniques and watch all these videos, and they're amazing what guys can do with horses and stuff that are ready to kill someone, and in 30 minutes they can be riding them. But it's not easy to do. Anyone can learn it, but it takes time.
Right. Yeah. Baptized by fire, in fire, said that he was taught young, don't stand behind horses. Yeah, that I know as well. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, even a big dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, can do damage. All right. Well, that's good to know. Do you want to share your screen again?
Yeah, I was just pulling it up here. So I wanted to share kind of one of the designs that we've done for a client here. Just to kind of show what this looks like. Can you see that screen there?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a design we did for a client. This was my farmhand last year. His family owns some land near us, and we did this design for them. But it was kind of laying out, where their future house and their shop was going to go, and where their livestock system and barn, gardens and all this stuff. And again, this is based on that order of operations. And I did write a book called the Building Your Permaculture Property, a 5-step process to design, develop land. And if folks want to kind of learn the whole step-by-step process for where to put all these different elements, it's definitely possible, but it takes a few years. So this is one of the services we offer for folks. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is, like, there's a lot of intricacy in these designs. So, like, most people, if they're building a new house, they wouldn't build their own house or design their own house. And in a house, there's really only like 5 or 6 rooms. There's bedrooms, bathrooms, there's a kitchen, there's a living room, there's closets, there's a mechanical room, and it's a pretty tightly contained, footprint. There's only so many configurations of how those things need to be arranged, but it's pretty complex. Now you get into a homestead, and you've got, an order of magnitude beyond that level of complexity, in terms of, the gardens, the greenhouses, the, trees, the roads, the equipment storage, the barns, the livestock waters, the fencing. And so, again, we like to say there's good, there's fast, and there's cheap, and you can only pick 2. And so if folks are wanting to do this work themselves, which is a great solution, it's a ton of fun, it's super rewarding, but it's not going to be fast. It'll take time to learn this stuff and to know where to put all these things. But if you don't have a well-designed, chore path in a livestock handling system, you're going to be spending hours and hours every single day for the rest of your life, just to pay for the fact that you put, a hydrant or a water or a fencing system in the wrong place. So if you are going to do this stuff yourself, like starting with the design is I think absolutely critical, and like laying stuff out. And you really need to do it from a bird's eye view, because when you're on the ground, you can't see the whole system. You can only see line of sight, what's around you. But as soon as you get above, and in the book I walk through, different tools like Google Earth Pro and different systems to help take away some of that complexity and make it easier to see connections. But yeah, there's a lot going on in some of these small systems. Here's another. This is for a client in North Carolina that we're working with right now. This one's quite small. It's only about 10 acres, but and they had raw land, so it was just really simple systems. But if you are going to go kind of the DIY route, try to get everything modular as much as possible, because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to build something and realize, oh crap, that should have been over there. To allow yourself that flexibility to make that mistake. Oh, you're muted there, Beth.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of things to consider there on partitioning your land. And then, so what kind of land should we get into? What kind of land or what kind of animals?
Sure.
But I know you talked about last time how if a wild animal such as a bear thrives there, chances are pigs will do well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that how you decide?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to think about species selection is if what happens can comprehend and copy nature. So what animals live here now or have lived here historically and thrived, and how can I either use those exact species, or how do I find analog species that are domesticated that will, essentially provide the same function in the ecosystem.
Right. And so let's see where to go. What if we talk about small animals being, I think you already implied that they were, it's going to be less of a commitment. They don't break out of the electric fence so easily.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
Say here in Canada, and given the climate that, small animals could potentially live inside in the winter, right? Depending on, or the same way you've built maybe a chicken coop, then is that conducive to?
Yeah.
And what small animals are desirable for their meats, and is it the same kind of level of consideration that do they thrive on this land, or does it get less so?
I mean, I would say, so take, for example, like if you've got a property with a lot of water on it, and it was a low-lying area, like there'd be a lot more aquatic, fowl there, like ducks, geese, things like that, versus if you're more, treed and forested, it's going to be more, chickens and turkeys potentially. So there can be some selection there, but those are the smaller animals. Even if you if you've got a dry property and you want to have ducks, you can build ponds and things like that. They do require a lot less infrastructure. And if you do make a mistake with those animals, like, 100 chickens only drink, a 5 or 10 gallon bucket of water a day. So if you have to carry it to them, it's not going to be the end of the world. But, one cow will drink 15 gallons of water a day, and one pig can, they'll drink probably 4 or 5 gallons a day. And if you can bring it over to them, they can dump it right on the ground, right in front of you. And there's nothing more frustrating than hauling water across the yard to a pig just to have him dump it out. And then you got to do it again. And I think small animals, and particularly going with something like a meat animal, like a meat chicken or a meat duck, where you don't have to overwinter them, that can be a really great segue into getting experience with animals. That's a little bit lower, maximum it's going to be, if it's a broiler, like a commercial chicken, it's only like 8 to 10 weeks commitment. versus if it's more of a heritage breed, which I would encourage people to go through. I personally don't like the broilers, but the more of a heritage breed, it'll be kind of like 16 to 18 weeks, for like max, before you harvest them. And so that's basically a summertime project, and that's a great way to start. Turkeys might be a bit longer, and you can kind of ease your way into that as, okay, well, maybe we'll get laying hens. We'll try them through the winter. And one thing I would say about the laying hens is so I've done a lot of videos on like our winter chicken coop that we have on our farm. Again, we're based in central Alberta, so it gets minus 40 here for at least a week a year, if not more. We had 6 months of winter. So we always went with really well insulated chicken coops that basically heat themselves. And ours is like passive solar design. It's a great system. Now, going forward, I haven't built one of these systems myself. However, I've seen enough guys do it, guys like Richard Perkins, Joel Salatin in the States. I think the ideal overwintering system for small animals is actually a greenhouse, or a hoop house, because and again, I would encourage folks to go watch someone like Richard Perkins, who lives in Sweden. He's got several videos of the systems that he uses with his greenhouses. So in the summertime, he uses his greenhouses to grow, massive crops. He's a commercial grower. Then in the wintertime, when those crops are done, he brings either sheep or chickens right into the greenhouses. He's got temporary infrastructure he sets up. He deep beds them inside all winter, which is basically just putting straw on top of manure and layering it on like a lasagna garden. And, it can be several feet deep by the end of the winter. Then in the spring, he comes in, brings all that manure out, composts it, and then he brings last year's stuff that's been composting for a year back in, and then grows crops in there. And then the animals are out on pasture. And I think that is probably the most cost-effective and the most functional winter housing system for animals that need some kind of protection. Now, on our farm, like my dairy cows, my pigs, our beef cows, if we had sheep, anything that's a bit larger, we don't use anything beyond like a skid shelter. It's like a lean-to, so a 3-sided structure with a roof that's open on the front, facing south, and some wind protection. And then we do the same deep bedding system, but we do it in a corral that's open air, and it works great. And that's even lower infrastructure. You couldn't do that with chickens; they would freeze. But with pigs and cows, even when it's minus 40, they're tough enough. I milk right through the winter. My production's not as good as if I had a heated barn, but then I'd have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a heated barn. But even that, like if you could build a big enough hoop house or like a tarp building or something that you could keep that whole livestock shelter underneath. I've designed systems like that for certain clients who are in wetter areas where they get a lot more rain, where that corral would just be muddy otherwise. So that could be another idea there.
Right. Just a quick note, I learned from one farmer about heating in a very efficient way. She was up in the Northwest Territories, so like really intense cold for even longer than we're used to. And so she would have like an overall structure that was just like could be a tent or a greenhouse. And then within that would have small tents, and each small tent would have a heating light, a single heating light bulb in it. Oh, yeah. And that was enough to sustain sheep and goats. And I'm not sure about like cows, you said can take it more, but the smaller animals were able to stay warm enough that way. Have you ever used that kind of a thing?
Yep. I have done that in like smaller buildings. Like if we have generally we don't calve in the wintertime, except some of our milk cows. If we want to have milk all year round, we do. And in that case, the calf for the first couple of weeks, they aren't big enough to sustain themselves for warmth. So we'll have either some kind of a calf hutch or a small building with just a heat lamp in it to bump it up enough. But yeah, absolutely, that could be another way. But yeah, I would say in those buildings I was talking about, like with Perkins with the chicken house and the chickens inside the greenhouse, there's just enough birds in there that their body heat itself is what heats the building. Or our chicken coop, which is just 2x6 walls on a skid building on grade, it never goes below freezing in there, even though we've got probably 2 to 3 square feet per bird inside. They have enough body heat to just keep the building above freezing just on their own. Now, and they do still come out during the day, but when it's really cold, and this is where I like Perkins' system, is when it's really cold, it is the air conditioning, the air quality inside can get poor when you've got that many birds, and it's -40 for a few days. So having them in a bigger area that was more of a greenhouse, even though it might be a bit cooler, they would just have a bit more area to run around and get some exercise during those cold snaps.
Right. And would there be a minimum size to that greenhouse?
No, I would say it'd be more a function of like square feet per animal.
Per animal. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I believe it's around, like, I wouldn't go much less than 2 square feet per bird, like floor space in a building. And of course, any building you make should be big enough that you can walk in. Like a lot of these chicken coops I see that are, these tiny little kind of dog houses, don't do that. You'll never be able to clean it out, or if you do, you're going to need a hazmat suit and a shower afterwards, because that's that drudgery piece. You're not going to want to do that. Pollution's going to build up. The animals are going to get sick. So anything that you're building, I'm assuming, is going to be at least, regular size doors that you can get into. And we've got, like, our coops or our roost bars are on hinges so that they actually swing up, so you can clean underneath them, and really good systems. But regardless of how many birds you have, at least the 6-foot ceilings or whatever, and then I would say 2 to 4 square feet per bird would be like a minimum, and the more the better. But the bigger the space, the less body heat they're going to get from that space.
Right. Very good. What about things like guinea pigs and rabbits?
Yeah, we've never had any ourselves, but I think it would be a lot of the same infrastructure. I do know people who have raised rabbits with their chickens, like inside a deep mulch system like that, which works quite well, because the rabbits almost act like pigs in that they root up the bedding pack and aerate it and get a lot more composting action going on. Guinea pigs would be the same way. I think if I was going to do, guinea pigs or chicken or rabbits like that, I would use the same chicken tractors that I use. That, again, I've got some videos on my YouTube channel, but they're you can build your own design. But there's an Amish company in the States called Allumacoop that builds just a beautiful system that I think is the best in the world. And I'm a dealer for them here in Alberta or in Western Canada. But they would work for any of those small animals. And so my ideal system, and this is what I'm doing at my new place, is in the summertime, I've got these Allumacoops that are, I'll just share my website here, that they can be out on grass, and they're super easy to move around. There's different sizes for different, numbers of animals, and they are, if you take a look at, say, like a 6x10 here, they have a wheel system on the back and a little door handle at the front. When you pick that handle up, the wheels get pushed down and the whole frame lifts off the ground. And you can get, in that 6x10, you can get, 10 turkeys or 15 ducks or 24 layers or 30 or 40 meat birds. You could probably do 30 or 40 rabbits in the same system, and allows you to move it every day. But what's cool is that at the end of the year, if you had that greenhouse system as well, you would just pull this thing right into your greenhouse. So you wouldn't have to take any infrastructure apart. And then you could just rotate the whole thing around the greenhouse, or back and forth, up and down, depending how big your greenhouse is. So this is now my ideal system. I haven't built one yet for myself, but I'll be doing one probably next year on my place for any small animals, whether it's egg layers, or if I was doing rabbits or guinea pigs or anything like that, would be some version like this. That is, again, if you want to free range them and leave the door open and then have like electronetting around it, you can do that. If you want to, this year, once my birds got big enough, I just opened the door and they totally free ranged. But they're so modular and adaptive. I brooded my chicks right on grass this year with a heat lamp hanging inside the building, with the sides enclosed. They're incredible little pieces of tech. And there's other kits online designs you can see, but they're made of wood and they're quite expensive. They're hard to move around. So yeah, if you are going to build one of those, try to make it as light as you possibly can. But if you're in a really windy area, or if you want to be able to send your 12-year-old kid out to do chores, I think something like this is the way to go.
Could you move that with your own bare hands, or would you need a tractor to pull it around?
No, this is I don't know if I've got any. I've got a video on my YouTube channel that kind of shows how you move it around, but I can move it with one hand.
Amazing. Right. Yeah, that was more the Joel Salatin style, right? That was.
Yeah, but even easier, like his systems, he has to have like a pry bar and a wheel system on each thing that he puts underneath and then walks around to like put the wheels up. This thing, you literally you grab that handle, you pick it up. There's a cable system that goes down. It pushes 2 wheels. It lifts it 4 inches off the ground. You pull it ahead, you let go, and you're done. And so you can move it. I was doing it two times a day, but if you wanted to have really high density animals in there, it's effortless. Like it's as fast as you can walk, you can move these systems. Like I said, they are hands down the best designed chicken or small animal tractor I've ever seen in the world. I saw them at a Mother Earth News Fair years ago in Pennsylvania, and I've been trying to get them up here for years. And yeah, I finally became a dealer this year for them, and they're awesome. I got a client up north who has one. He sent me a picture the other day. They had like 6 inches of wet, heavy snow, and this thing was just fine. The tarp was solid. The chickens were still, putting around in there. And then in probably a few more weeks, once it gets a bit colder, he's just going to pull it right inside his greenhouse, and they'll spend all winter in there. And then spring comes around, you pull them right out, and away you go.
Fantastic. What a great tip. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And what about for like culinary? Most people obviously are leaning more towards chickens rather than guinea pigs. And, when do you think it's just a matter of getting used to certain kinds of meat, or is it, we're hoping we're not in that survival, eat anything, including your friends mode, but.
I think they'd actually be a great system. Like the rabbits are quite lean, and so I wouldn't go that route just because. Yeah, I think fat is a big part of my diet, and that's where a lot of the energy is. But I think guinea pigs would be a really cool system to integrate into that. In the same way that I have my like dairy cows and pigs and chickens, and like those 3 animals make a really great ecosystem for each other, and they all eat each other's pests. They all help to cycle each other's nutrients. They all help to they eat each other's wasted feed. So like if the cows step in some of their hay, they won't eat it, but the pig will. And if the pig steps in his food, he won't eat it, but the chickens will. And if the chickens waste any grain, when I clean their chicken house, it goes in the pig pen, and the pigs eat that. And so like you really get these beautiful levels, just like you would in an ecosystem where there's all these different animals that are in these kind of trophic levels. And so on a small scale, if I didn't have larger animals, I would absolutely design something with, some kind of poultry and a guinea pig or potbelly pig or some kind of small animal. And they could literally live in that tractor with the chickens, and they would just move around, be part of them. I know people that have done that with rabbits, like I said, but I would be more leaning towards smaller pigs. I do think, if you've got the land for it, just the regular breeds are just bigger. They're easier to butcher. There's more, if you are going to take them to a butcher, there's other resources available versus if you're not taking a 15-pound guinea pig to a butcher, they wouldn't know what to do with it. Yeah, I think they'd be a great little system. And I know some cultures, I think it's the Peruvians, that's like one of their main meat sources is these little guinea pigs. And you can go to restaurants there and have like a whole roasted guinea pig for a meal with a couple people. So
Interesting. Yeah, it'd be a psychological barrier, but
Mhm.
could go with that. Yeah. So specifically, the farm that I'm working at is around 40 acres or less in a Manitoba kind of climate similar to Alberta, Saskatchewan. What are the best animals that you would start with in that zone?
Yeah.
I know.
Go ahead.
Oh, just given that you said that what animals would already thrive there and getting that mirror there, but do you have a sense right off?
Yeah, I mean, 40 acres, that's enough land that you could pretty much do anything. Like you could do dairy cows, sheep, goats, pigs, any kind of poultry. I would be more leaning towards kind of like is there a lot of trees on the property? Like, do you have a lot of oak trees?
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of oak trees. Interesting question. I don't really know. There's a lot of poplar, if that
Okay.
speaks to it. I should know if there's oak trees. We're mostly in the garden, not in the forest. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in your area, like the bur oak is kind of the native forest there, and if you have a lot of bur oak, I would absolutely get pigs,
Okay.
because they would, in the fall they'd be able to you could finish them at this time of year would be perfect. You could finish them on acorns, that is the most expensive pork in the world is the Iberico ham, and you can buy it for it's like $100 a kilo, which is these pigs that are raised in, I think it's Italy, and they finish them on the cork oaks that fall to the ground in the fall there. So, but yeah, now it'd be more based on like, what are your goals? Like, do you want to have dairy animals? Do you have a lot of weed pressure that you're trying to get rid of? That like if your pastures aren't suitable for dairy cows, maybe you need to get sheep or goats for a year or two first to improve those pastures before you bring them on. So it'd be more of a kind of a combination between what your goals are and where your land is at in the successional cycle. So yeah, where would you say you guys are at? Do you have good pastures?
I think so. How would you assess that?
So lots of diversity. There'd be lots of legumes. So like nitrogen fixing plants. The grasses would be lush and dark green, with not a lot of weedy species. So like the thorny or brambly type things, there wouldn't be a lot of those. It'd mostly be like lush, diverse grasses and legumes.
Yeah, I think we're more on that side
Okay.
than
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So then I would say you could go right into, you can basically have any animal, but goats need about like 70% of their diet is browse or like woody material, like sticks and twigs and leaves and stuff and bark. Sheep, it's like 40%, but cows they're pretty much 100% grass. They will eat some browse as well, but they do better on grass. So based on that, I would say you'd be leaning more towards the kind of larger ruminant animals. So yeah, do you guys want to get dairy cows at some point, or?
I bet that's not as high a priority over the meat. I was just actually thinking that there's a Saskatoon orchard, and it requires a lot of upkeep and
Yeah.
taking out of dead branches and everything like that. Would goats do that for us?
Sure.
Or is
Yeah. Goats are sheep. Yeah, like there's a lot of vineyards that are actually using sheep as part of their vineyard management to manage the ground cover and actually the lower pruning of the grape vines. They're actually just running sheep in the understory. Goats might be a bit too aggressive. Like they might actually kill them, but that's where management, it's all about doing the right amount of the right thing at the right time in the right place. Like if you were to if you left goats out there for a season, yeah, they would kill a bunch of stuff. But if they were there for a day in a small paddock, and then you were watching them when they did the right amount of management, and then you moved them on, absolutely, I think they could be really great for that.
Fun. Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool.
I was also going to say there, with your so with your beef cows, so if you're leaning more towards beef cows and not dairy cows, a really great place to start is to just get like yearlings or younger animals, like to buy them in the spring and then finish them for the summer and then harvest them in the fall. That way you don't have to have a lot of complex infrastructure. You're not feeding over the winter. You don't even necessarily need a tractor. You just need good perimeter fence and then a corral like I was talking about, and then a water system. That's what I'm going to be doing at my place for next year, my new property, before I have all the infrastructure for milk cows and pigs, is just buying 10 or 15 yearlings, raising them through the summer, and then harvesting them in the fall.
Right. And then you just start fresh every single year. And
Yep.
Yeah, because I was going to ask about breeding. And is that something that seems like it's a whole other can of worms? Breeding.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit more complex. That's where you start to need typically at least 2 herds, or like a place for your bull to go when you're not breeding, or you're sharing him with somebody else, or you're doing artificial insemination, which we've never done it. I prefer not to go that route. I think there's, I think nature figured that out. And I think it's best to leave that alone. But like for years, what we did before we had enough animals to warrant having a bull is we would just borrow one from a neighbor. And so we had to kind of, beggars can't be choosers. Our breeding cycle was based around when he didn't need his bull, but that helped us to, not have to have that infrastructure by itself for the first few years. But yeah, so the easiest thing is just to buy yearling animals. And even if you want to raise them through the winter, that way you don't have to mess around with the breeding, and you could harvest them at different stages and kind of go that.
Right.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to do succession buying, so that, like, say, the number of people that 3 cows a year harvested would be plenty of meat? I don't know if that's realistic for a small family or something like that. And then would you try to get yearlings at different times so that they would mature at different times?
You could, but to be honest, I think they would probably, like, they just get more fat. Like, if they're pretty selective. Like, we butcher ours at 17 months, but they'd be amazing at 6 months. Like, it'd be veal at 6. At 17 months, it's amazing. At 24 or 36 months, it'd be even better. And I've had cows that are, we butchered 16-year-old cows, and you just make a lot of sausage, but the prime cuts, the steaks are still amazing. It's just a lot of the other meats are a bit tougher. So not really. You could buy them. It'd be better to probably buy them all as one herd, where they know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing I'll say too, is if you're going to buy an animal, you buy 2 at least. Whatever animal you're getting, whether it's pigs or dairy cows or beef cows or sheep, they need a buddy. It's a really big part of their quality of life. So yeah, I would honestly just buy them as a group, and then you could harvest them at different times.
Right. Yeah. Especially, like, they're herd animals, so they must be desperately unhappy with even 2. Do you think is that going to be hard?
I think 2 would be the minimum for sure.
Right.
And if you've got like a dairy cow with her calf, that would be okay. But even then, like, yeah, they love having their buddies around, and it's a big part of it. So, yeah, cow and a calf would be the minimum, or kind of 2 around the same age. And the other thing that I would say, if you're going to do that right off the bat, if you are going to be like staging them, is say you bought, 5 cows, this spring or whatever, you could harvest one every quarter, and then leave the like by the time the fifth or the next spring comes around, bring in another batch of cows while that fifth one is still there, and let him train the other ones up for before the next quarter when you harvest that guy, and you can kind of cycle them through. There is a massive amount of teaching that happens between animals when they get used to a place. And this is really one of the biggest downside of what I'm recommending, which is not breeding your own animals, is you won't get that adaptation to your context. Really, you can have a little bit if you've got, like I said, that lead animal that you're kind of, is a bit of a transition, but the amount of change that I've seen in my pigs or our cows over the years, as we've just kept the same animals, the same females get bred, and then they teach their children, and then their children stay, and we have these like multi-generational kind of legacies of genetics. It's really cool to see the adaptation start to take place. So you won't get as much of that, but you know, it's still, as long as you're buying animals from your region, from a good other breeder, it shouldn't be a huge deal. But like, I'll tell you a quick story. This was a couple years ago. So I've got videos of my grazing system, or my integrated livestock system, where my dairy cows and pigs graze together in the same system. So they're in the same hub, they're in the same paddocks every day. And the way that I typically do it is, you know, I save my best 4 or 5 females every fall from my batch. I harvest everybody else. I breed those in the spring. They give birth. They raise their babies all summer. I harvest them in the fall, and then I save their best 4. And I've done that for 10 or 15 years now. And having the mothers teach their babies, like most people would wean at like 4 to 6 weeks. So they physically take the babies away from the mother sows. I don't. I let my sows self-wean. So when they get sick of nursing their babies, they stop them. And then when they've decided, that's when I harvest them in the fall. So a couple years ago, I had a bad batch of feed that or a grain that I bought, and it had something called ergot in it, which is it's a fungus that grows on rye. It was actually the precursor of LSD. So this is where a lot of the witch hunts came from in the
Exactly. That's what came to mind.
Yeah, in the kind of medieval times, if you had a really wet year, all the grain and beer would be contaminated with ergot, and people would literally have psychotic visions of demons and stuff like that. And so, anyways, I had this bad batch of ergot that, just the way the timing worked out, it was right when I was about to farrow, or my piglets were going to have babies. And ergot actually is I can't remember the name, but it dries up milk. It stops milk production. And so my sows, they gave birth. The first one had like a full batch of healthy piglets. She weaned them, nursed them for a little bit, but then like the longer it went on, she dried up within a week. And then like a few weeks later, some of the sows that gave birth, their babies actually just died right away because they were sick from that. So anyways, it was the first batch of pigs I ever raised that didn't have mothers. Because even though the adults were there, they weren't nursing them, and so there wasn't that connection. And it was like chaos. Like all the systems broke down. The animals didn't do what they were doing. They started nursing off my cows because I raised them in the same pen. They wouldn't go out to graze. They're like totally different pigs. And it was just crazy to see that difference. And then, you know, it's been several years since, so I've got that back. But you know, now like the mothers, they're taking the pigs out to pasture because they've been there for a whole year, and they're kind of showing them the ropes and eat this, don't eat that. And so again, I'm not saying you have to have a system like that, because it is more complex to start doing your own breeding. But when you're ready for it and you have that, that's where it gets even more fun. Again, that's that work and pollution thing, right? Or the needs and yields. It's like, if those babies need a mother, and if they don't have it, it's going to be a lot of work for me, and they're not going to be as healthy.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes right through the human experience as well. Yeah. A whole other subject we won't get into. But what's your opinion of the grass grazing versus grain and legume grazing?
like for ruminant animals, like cows and stuff like that, or
Yeah.
So I animals should be fed a biologically appropriate diet. So whatever they would have been eating for, thousands and thousands of years is absolutely the way to go. So anything that's a ruminant, sheep, goats, dairy cows, beef cows, they should be eating grass. Now, if you're going to grow a grain crop, like or a cover crop or a polyculture crop or something like that, there is a way you can harvest it or let them graze it before it becomes a grain crop, which is basically before it hardens off and turns to grain, you can either cut it and bale it as it's called green feed. That's fine. The animals love it. We do that some years, or you can actually graze that crop before it produces grain, and it's just like grass, and that's totally fine. But the grains themselves, like if a cow that kind of gets I think it's like even say half a gallon of grain, or sorry, half of a 5-gallon bucket of grain, so 2.5 gallons of grain. If a cow that's not used to grain gets that much grain in one feeding, it'll kill it. Like their rumen, they literally blow up from the inside because their rumens just go crazy. So they're not it changes the whole composition of the meat, and it causes acidosis. So their blood literally becomes acidic, and it leaches calcium out of their bones, and it causes all this stuff when you start feeding grain. So that's my 2 cents. I will say on that topic, a lot of people will say, well, I don't like the taste of grass finished beef. And grain finished meat tastes better. So I have a theory about that. And this isn't necessarily proven, but it's borne out in our own kind of experience on the farm. I believe that when animals like dairy or cows are fed a biologically appropriate diet like grass, something hormonally changes in their endocrine system. So if you're a hunter and you shoot a deer or an elk or a moose or whatever, and it's an instant kill, the animal dies right away, the meat is delicious. If the animal gets injured and it runs for a half mile and then it collapses from exhaustion, the meat is inedible. They call them sausage deer here. I believe the same is true with grass-fed animals, is that if they're stressed before they're harvested, the meat becomes tough. It has those stress hormones like the cortisol and the adrenaline in the meat. And I believe that is what gives a lot of the store-bought grass-fed meat this metallic, gross taste.
Interesting.
When we switched from harvesting our animals on farm a few years ago, it's illegal, or it was illegal. We got the law changed. And anyways, that's a whole other story. But when we used to have to take them to abattoirs, so there's a kind of a sick joke in farmers where it's like, my animals only have one bad day. And like that's like the standard of, I've heard Joel South, everyone says it. Our animals only have one bad day. But that one bad day is awful. Like they're hauled on a truck at 100 kilometers an hour to a strange place where they spend, several hours, if not overnight, with other animals they've never met before, with other people they've never met before. It's basically like Auschwitz. It's basically what it is for animals. It's terrible. Even I've been in like world-class, like $100 million harvesting facilities. They're incredible. Even the best facilities, abattoirs, are terrible. There's just no way good to do it. Or you can go and throw a flake of hay on the ground in the pasture where that animal's been its whole life, and it looks down to take a bite and it's gone and lights are out. And when you put those two steaks side by side, the one that had zero stress, that had zero bad day, is going to be unbelievably different. And this is what we've seen on our farm, is when we used to take them to the abattoirs because the government forced us to, we would get complaints quite frequently. The steaks are tough. The roasts aren't cooking properly, or they taste funny, or whatever. I haven't had a single complaint in 10 years.
Amazing.
And when I was in Texas for the Alex Zek podcast, one of my colleagues, Chris, came down with me. and we went out to, it was like Whole Foods or something, and we got like, we're gonna treat ourselves. So we bought like, $50, organic, certified regenerative, grass-fed prime rib steaks, and we brought them home. We were so excited. I couldn't eat it.
And they sucked.
They sucked. I couldn't eat it. Like, and it's funny because I don't buy meat, but that's the first time, because every once in a while I'll go out to a restaurant and I'll have a steak. I always regret it, but they're usually grain-fed steak. But that was the first like grass-fed steak that I'd ever had that wasn't from our farm in years. And I was like, oh, this is what people talk about when they don't like the taste of grass-fed. It was like this grainy, or not grainy, metallic-y, just a weird taste, and ours don't have that. And I've had other people say the same thing, that when they buy our meat and they've bought from other farms around us in the same ecosystem, and they're doing great stuff. Like, these are amazing farmers, but that one bad day can undo, I think, a whole lifetime of great experiences. So I believe on-farm, zero stress, not even low stress, zero stress livestock harvesting is absolutely critical. Now, there is research that's shown, and this is industry research that shows they've done it with pork and beef, where if the animals are extremely stressed, it literally changes the composition of the meat. It changes the color, the texture, the flavor, the amount of water in it. So they know that it does. I'm saying that I think that those animals that are raised in feedlots are probably more used to handling and being around people because they're in a feedlot situation than a grass-fed animal. And I think there might also be some component of their diet that it's more like a wild deer. So it may be a kind of a twofold thing, where just the commercial animals are more used to being handled and they're kind of acclimatized to the stress. And so it's not a big deal, but there's something different with grass-fed animals for sure. And it's a common thing that people say. So that's my theory on why no one likes grass-fed meat.
Interesting. Yeah, when you talk about metals, then I start to think about like, and it almost might make more sense that the grass would have more metals like iron and copper, and what's the third one that we think of as a health food, but it's really not. I can't think of off the top of my head. But so yeah, interesting that grain would actually have more of a metallic taste.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Pardon me.
Yeah.
You're talking about the grass. Anyway, yeah, I got that backwards. So
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is strange. And like I said, our meat used to have, like, well, it's funny, even when we were taking our animals to the abattoir, we would always harvest our own meat ourselves, and we butchered it ourselves. So that's how I was raised on that meat. And it's very rare that I eat, other people's meat. But I do think there's, I mean, again, if it's true with deer, everyone knows that with deer. I think the same thing is true with our grass-fed animals, which is another reason why, like, having these systems set up so that when it comes time to harvest your animals, that goes really smoothly, and that it is, a beautiful and sacred experience, because it can be done where there's literally zero stress, or it can be absolutely terrible. And I've had experiences of both, and it sucks. And so having those corrals, like I'm talking about, like when we harvest our animals, like there's a whole system where, the animals that haven't been harvested yet aren't looking at their buddy getting killed.
Oh,
they're in a separate pen, versus in the abattoirs, they're literally in a line, and the one who's going next gets to see, his 10 buddies ahead of him exactly what's going to happen. They're awful.
Right. Right.
And,
Yeah.
And same thing with our pigs and our chickens. We try to be really, really conscientious of how we do that. And you're going to make mistakes, like you're gonna, but you learn from it. And as you go forward, and this is maybe we'll touch on the ethics piece of this too, because there's,
Of course.
There's generally three oppositions to eating meat. It's bad for the environment, it's bad for us, it's bad for our health, or it's just immoral.
Cool.
And the first two are really easy to knock out of the water. It's like there's more buffalo in North America than there are beef cattle today. You can just see animals involved in this planet. They're a critical part of these ecosystems. They're not causing climate change. It's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And then the health component is, well, every indigenous culture everywhere always ate meat. So anyone who says that is just, you just call them a racist and they go away. The third piece though is hard because the animals suffer. They can suffer if they're not raised properly. Suffering is bad. We don't want that. But I heard a really great, I've thought about this a lot, and I've had some really profound experiences with raising animals, harvesting them, doing it incredibly well, and then having shit where you miss, and the bullet doesn't hit right away. It's not fun. But it was Alan Savory. He was on a podcast. I heard him talk about this, and he said, in nature, being eaten by a predator is the best way to go. And I thought, and he kind of explained it. He's like, he spent his whole life watching wild animals. He was a game warden in Africa for years. He's the founder of Holistic Management. And he said he's watched thousands and thousands of animals starve to death or break their leg in a water hole, where they basically lay there for days or weeks, or they get diseased and they just basically slowly, get eaten from the inside by parasites. He said, like, in nature, being strangled for a minute by a cheetah or a lion or a pack of hyenas is the most merciful way to go. And it just hit me of like, yeah, that is so true. And so like for us to be able to, so I believe that animals domesticated themselves, and there's more evidence of this all the time, that pigs for sure did it. Cats for sure did it. There's some evidence that shows that beef, I think they chose. I think this is the mutual consent, mutual benefit. There was some agreement, thousands of years ago that was reached by certain species, not all of them, but certain species. They decided to partner with us because they knew it was going to be better for them. The alternative. So my deal with my animals is, you get to live a better life than you could have lived out in nature. You'll never starve to death. You will never be out without water. You're not going to be, terrified your whole life that something's going to eat you in the middle of the night. If you do get sick, I will put you down, in a very, quick and compassionate way. And when it does come time for me to harvest you, there will be zero stress. And like, that is an incredible agreement that in a win-win relationship that you can't get anywhere else in nature. And I think that's for me what, like, it's called animal husbandry because it's a marriage, it's a relationship between, multiple things. But we have a part of the bargain to uphold is that we need to do it with compassion and respect, and when it's done well, with zero suffering. But even in situations where, if you miss or it's not an instantaneous death, it's still miles better than, being slowly strangled by a grizzly bear for 3 or 4 minutes. So that's my piece on the ethical component is I think it is a win-win relationship that they've decided to take part of, but there's conditions to that.
Of course. Yeah. And lots of game moment decisions, I have to imagine. For example, putting animals down. When I was in India, they had, I'm not arguing for this, but they had a philosophy that you never put an animal down because they have their time and a human would be interfering with that. So that's a very extreme place where I guess they would let animals suffer and maybe into the future. I had a cat that was dying and everybody was telling me to put her down. I kept asking God, I kept asking her, like, if you want this, I will do it. And I never got that sign. And there was sure signs of her thanking me for that. So timing was everything. What's your take on this? I know it's a hard question.
Yeah, it is. And I think I think there'd be, if you're in tune with your animals enough, there will be some communication there. Like we had a dairy cow go down last winter. It was during the -40 stuff. I bought her from a dairy barn. They lied to me. She had a bad infection in her leg. When we got her leg had actually been broken, I think, when she was a calf, and they had kind of like put it back together. They told me it was fine. I trusted them. And anyways, she was never healthy, and she was always lame. And then we got a -40 stretch, and she went down, and she just refused to get up. And we tried everything for days to help her eat and feed. And eventually she just refused to eat or drink water or do anything. And as soon as she stopped like wanting to live, I called the butcher that day, and yeah, she was harvested that afternoon. But so like that's the kind of piece where it's like when they give up, or there's like there's a sign that they don't want to anymore, then I would step in. But there's other animals where they'll pull through some incredibly tough stuff as well.
Right. Yeah. That's a really good way to answer that question. It's a big one. Hey, Paul, nice to see you. And oh boy, there's so much here. So your choice to harvest an animal or to kill an animal, obviously, it's funny how it's even hard to say that as a bona fide meat eater on this side. I think it's a more masculine job. I don't know if you've seen women go through that, but shooting them is like the way to go. And what caliber and what kind of a firearm would you use?
Yeah, great question. So, this year we hired a butcher a woman to come out who butchers chickens professionally. She has like a mobile rig, and she had what's known as like a stun knife. And I'd never seen one before for chickens. I've seen them for other animals, but it's basically just an electronic, like a high voltage. So like the knife that she used to butcher had a cord on it, and if she put her foot on a certain button, the knife became electric, and she just had to touch the chickens on the head, and they just instantly went limp. And I've never, like when you cut a chicken's head off, which is the normal, they'll kick for 20, 30 seconds, and it's quite, quite harsh. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's the way to go. I don't know how much that thing costs, but like, yeah, I'm never doing that any other way. She called it a hot knife. And apparently there's one of the abattoirs I toured this summer, they had a similar thing for pigs, and it was like a reverse head to heart electronic thing. So you just like put it on their back, and it just sent a charge kind of the opposite way from where the head and heart goes, and their lights out instantly. So I am potentially leaning more towards that based on what I've seen is at least for pigs and chickens. But for years, all we did was chickens are, cut their head off. Pigs would be, shot in the head with typically like a 22 Magnum is the smallest that I would go for a pig. For a bigger pig, you might want to go with like a 223, something that's got a bit more oomph to it. Like my sows, when I harvest them, because their skulls are thicker, I use a 223, which that's not quite legal to kill. It's funny. It's not legal to kill a deer with that, but that's the same round that is legal all around the world for armies. So you can kill people with it. It's fine, but you can't kill a deer with it. But that caliber is plenty for that's what our butcher uses for pigs and beef alike, is just a 223. I can't remember what the NATO conversion of that is, but that's really inexpensive ammunition. That's if I was to recommend someone to get some kind of a self-sufficiency or a shit hits the fan rifle, it would probably be a 223 or a 308, because those are the NATO kind of military rounds. They're the most cost effective. They're the most readily available rounds you can get. And yeah, it's bullet to the head, and then bleeding them out immediately is the way to go for that, for sure.
Right. And would that require hanging them to bleed them out?
You don't necessarily have to. You can start bleeding them. Like the way that we do it is they're with the pork and beef, they're shot, and then bleed them out immediately like as soon as they're on the ground, and then we'll get a tractor and pick them up. But they don't have to be bled out upside down. They can be bled out on the ground. Yeah.
And wouldn't they just bleed out naturally? Isn't that what they would do? Or is there something that you have to, okay, got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, we only picked them up because we're taking them to the rig that we use to, I don't know if I have a picture of the rig. I did a video with my butcher, actually. I interviewed him and I show the system that he uses. It's really slick. He's got like a crane on a truck and there's a pressure washer. And I would actually really encourage people, like you can't afford to butcher your own animals for what these mobile abattoirs can do. Like they're so efficient. And if you get a good guy who's respectful, I would encourage you, at least for the first time, get them to, there we go, NATO's 556.
That's what I thought. My son taught me. Yeah, I was going to say 556. Yeah.
I always mix them up. And then the other one is 7 something. I always forget the 308. Anyways.
Anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, I would actually encourage people, go to your local butcher shops. Every single one of them will have 2 or 3 cards on the front desk of whoever the local mobile abattoir is in your area. Talk to those guys. They'll come out. You can watch. You can sit there, make them a coffee. They'll love to talk with you. You can see how they do it. It's a great way to learn. They have so much to teach. It is an art. I've been butchering animals my whole life, but when you only do one a year, you're not going to be good at it. And
right,
it'll take me and my dad 2 hours to skin a pig, and this guy can do 4 in that same time by himself. And the meat's way better, like the cuts are way better, or the cleaning's way better. So again, I'm not saying don't do it yourself, but if you want to segue into it, that's a great way to see the tech that they've got. And it's really low tech, but it works. What else was I going to say there? Oh, and then for sheep, I've never done a goat, but I think it would be the same. I've heard people say that they're too twitchy. You can't shoot them. And so for them, the typical way is just to cut their throat. Which is, yeah, I don't know. I'd prefer to have some kind of a stun gun or something. There we go. 763. Yeah.
Got an expert in the house.
Got a good crowd here. It's
yeah, definitely. No, I can't help thinking about the self-sufficiency, and there could come that point where you can't get access to the abattoir anymore, or the abattoir won't work for you, or they won't go off the color outside the lines.
They're already talking about it. Was it Bill C-293? They're already talking about it. They're gonna, it's before the Senate right now. If certain things arise, they would have the ability to basically shut down the meat supply for our safety
via abattoirs. Or I guess that would just be part of it.
That's just one of the taglines was if we needed to spread in some kind of infectious diseases, we'd be able to go in at key points of the meat infrastructure system and stop it. So yeah,
right,
all so that there, yeah. If you've got a license with the government, with whatever it is, your name's on a list, and they are very good, as we saw during the lockdowns. It's like a matter of weeks, and every business had the same stickers and the same signs and the same shit on the floors and the same protocols and the same plexiglass. How did that all get mobilized so quickly?
Because the government planned.
Because it's planned, and the businesses weren't part of it. They just got a call from their local guy, and the chain of command goes down. So all it would take is one phone call, and every butcher shop, every abattoir, every meat counter. Sorry, we're not allowed to sell meat anymore.
Yeah. So make those relationships yesterday.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow, intense. Yeah, I think that everyone would have to be prepared for that eventuality that they'd have to. And I mean, I think it doesn't go without saying also that unless would you actually be required to license in Canada, or is it different from province to province if you didn't intend to sell meat?
It's different province to province. If you're selling locally, if you want to sell outside of provinces, then it has to be federally inspected. However, like the raw milk stuff, if there's enough people breaking the law, it becomes unenforceable. And
Exactly.
I believe that is the approach, is to, just if enough people are doing it, politicians will follow, and the rules will change. So I wish that I hadn't got the law changed from what I did, because now that law that we got changed, which was perfect for a couple of years, now they're changing. Excuse me. Now they're changing it. They want to come do farm inspections, and they want to test our water, and so I just, okay, I don't sell meat anymore. I handed in my license. So yeah, the way that the laws are set up is, if you sell it to any consumer, it needs to be, provincially inspected, and all these different hoops you got to jump through. But it is still, there's no law saying that you can't kill your own animal on your own farm. And so when we originally got caught, that's what we were doing, is I was selling live animals to my customers and renting them land, and then contracting the butcher to kill their animal on their land. And I had all the contracts, and all my invoices were built up that way. And they couldn't touch me, but they went after my butcher, and they threatened to shut him down. So, but that was 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah, we've since had that law changed, but it's getting worse again. So we're doing something different now, and I would encourage folks to do the same. Is don't do anything you don't think is right, even if the government says that you have to.
Yeah, amen to that. Exactly. Yeah, it is a very trite example, but we have on the books here that you need to license bicycles. Well, who does that? Nobody. And then, so they can't enforce it. They literally, there's too many people, and it would just get out of hand.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't tried. Yeah.
Wow. I would be like, I would also encourage people to be a bit like, there's a fine line. There's a tipping point, and we're not there yet for meat and stuff, where it's like, you can't be openly brazen about it, because they have to make an example out of you. But yes. I've had conversations with a lot of these inspectors, and basically, if you shut up and you're doing the right thing, they'll leave you alone. But if you're out there, standing in front of the tank, they're going to run you over, because they have to make an example of you to keep everybody else in line. So I think the solution is black market meat, basically. But also don't do stupid shit. Like, don't be cutting stuff up in your garage do it professionally. So there's ways that you can, ideally you're working with a local butcher who is trained, knows how to do it safely, but you're just not jumping through all the hoops or you're taking the courses so you know how to do it safely as well. Because it's a whole trade, and some people spend their whole lives doing it.
Indeed. Yeah. Do you think they'd go farm to farm and look and see what you have, and then dig up your butcher's address? And I know these are hard questions to answer, so don't worry about that. Let's see. So you talked a little bit about overwintering animals and how to make that less intensive with that structure that you talked about. Is there anything more that you would say about that? This is actually a question about making your own feed versus sourcing the feed.
Yeah, great question.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess first I'll start off with things to make for wintering animals. Most people, even myself, drastically underestimate how much carbon or straw or wood chips or some kind of dried carbonaceous material that you need for animals, for bedding, or just to absorb the manure and the urine that they have. It is enormous. Like, for my integrated livestock system, which I've got videos of, for 30 pigs and the 6 to 7 cows, I will use 1,000 pounds of straw a week for bedding. A week. And I could use, this year I'm probably going to use twice that much. And that's like the right amount of, you think about it, good compost is like 30% nitrogen to 70% carbon, I think. and one dairy cow or one beef cow will produce, 50 pounds of manure, urine, and poop a day. And so you start doing the math on it. It's enormous. And so again, if you don't have the right system for that, it creates pollution. It will stink, it will run off, it will pollute rivers, it will cause all these problems. So having some system, again, whether it's wood chips or leaves or straw or old hay, or you could cut cattails and mulch them up or whatever it is, you need something like that, and a lot of it for your animals. So my motto is, if it stinks, it means you're losing fertility. Like literally, that smell, that ammonia is nitrogen, which is money just evaporating. If you were to buy organic fertilizer or even conventional fertilizer, it's like 50 cents to $1 a pound. And so if you can smell it, you're losing it. So don't do that. Make sure you've got the infrastructure in place and the systems in place to handle that. And it's a lot. Like every year, that little corral with 30 pigs and 6 cows produces enough compost to cover 20 acres of land, like in a good amount of compost. And I hire corral cleaners to come in, the professional corral cleaners that with, a big excavator and loader and trucks, and in 4 hours they'll spread a whole winter's worth of compost on 20 acres. And I always do the worst 20 acres in our farm when I work through that. So in our climate, especially for 6 months of the year, for certain animals, ideally if you got beef cows, they're actually out on the land bale grazing. But if they're a bit more sensitive, like dairy cows, and they need to be contained for milking and stuff like that, having some kind of deep mulch system is ideal.
Right. Just out of curiosity, when you're on the highway, you're driving and they got those great big bales of straw. How many pounds are those? Like, how many of those would you go through?
That's like 1,000 pounds probably.
It's 1,000?
Yeah. So like I use one of those a week.
One a week. Man, that's a lot. I just got 6 bales of straw. I thought that was a lot. It's like, no.
Yeah. Now that's in the wintertime. In the summertime, I don't use any straw because they're out on pasture and it's fine. But yeah, in the wintertime, this year I'm probably going to use 1.5 a week, because last year it still wasn't enough. Like it still smelled a bit, and we've been like increasing every year, which is funny because most farmers, and this is how I was raised, like you always want to use the least amount of straw possible, because it's not so much that it costs money, it's that it builds up so much so fast, and then you have to deal with it. So if you don't have the systems, again, the work and pollution, spiral. But now that I've got onto that and I've got systems for it, and a company that I work with to spread the corrals, which they're everywhere. If you're in cattle country, it's effortless. It's a $1,500 a year to fertilize 20 acres of land. It's an absolute no-brainer.
Right.
So yeah, coming back to your feed question, I would say so first of all, you want to design a system that with whatever species you're using, that they can harvest the most amount of their feed themselves from the system, whether that's pigs or chickens or ducks or cows. So minimize the amount of fed feed that they need. But then if you need to feed them, I would say for most people, you should buy that feed from someone else. The amount of capital and expertise and time that it takes to do that, unless you want to turn that into a separate business. Like I also sell livestock feed for small scale homesteaders, and I probably have probably $200,000 to $200,000 worth of infrastructure just to make that feed. Now we were doing that ourselves. We had all that infrastructure beforehand just so we could make our own feed, because years ago you couldn't even buy this feed because it was, things are changed now. But now I'm using that same infrastructure as a business, and it generates $1 million a year in sales. And so that's a good business model. But to have all that just to feed a few animals, it doesn't make sense. Before, even when I was doing 30 pigs and 150 chickens, it kind of made sense, but it was mostly just because, I knew a guy and I could get something for cheap. But if you had to go and buy that stuff and you didn't have that kind of social capital that I had, you wouldn't be able to afford it. Same thing with making hay or straw. The value of the hay itself exceeds the amount of fertilizer in each bale of hay exceeds the value of the hay itself. So think of it this way: as you're buying hay to feed your animals, and you're getting fertilizer for free.
Right.
Versus if you're making your own hay, again, it's really expensive to do well. The quality will be down. Spend the $150 or $200 or whatever it is to buy the hay. And even like big producers, there's a fantastic book by Jim Garish called Kick the Hay Habit. And like, I know ranches that buy 3,000 bales of hay a year, even though they have all the equipment, they could do it themselves. They've got thousands of acres of land. It simply is more economical and more profitable to buy in the hay than it is to make it themselves. And I would say the same thing is true for grain. Now, of that, I also know guys who, in our climate, they fed hay for 9 days last winter. They have 300 head of cattle because they have such good grazing systems and winter watering systems and their management is so tight that they don't have to feed hay. That's the ideal. So rather than everyone focuses on how to grow their own grain or make their own hay or all that stuff, and then their rotational grazing systems or their fodder systems are terrible. Ignore that. Have a year's worth of feed, worst case scenario, in storage, whether it's in a grain bin or a hay shed. Buy it when it's cheap, in a good year, store it, it'll keep forever. That's your bank account. And then the rest of the time, put all of your attention into what are all the different ways I can feed my animals so that I don't have to use that hay in my bank account or the grain in my bank account. But when you have to use it, use it. Absolutely.
Right. And you say it lasts forever?
Pretty much. I mean, grain will last for 100 years in a good grain bin, as long as it's not ground. If the shells or the kernels are broken, they oxidize. Hay, I don't know how. If it was dry in a shed, we've got hay that's probably 5-6 years old right now, and we've fed hay that was stored outside, just in a field that was like 4 or 5 years old before. The outside gets a little brown. They don't eat that, but that would be my ideal scenario is don't put that infrastructure into the capital of making feed, put it into the capital of storing feed, and then the infrastructure and the skills to minimize how much feed you actually have to do, because that's where the value is. Like, for example, right now I've got 30 pigs. So this year's 25. And, we're grazing through our cattails right now. Again, I've got videos out on my channel. Right now, those pigs are eating probably the equivalent of, what would it be? Probably about $100 a day worth of feed. And when I moved them into those cattails, their feed consumption went down 50%. So they're eating half as much as they were the day before I moved them in there. And they've been doing that for a couple of weeks now.
Right. Did you say $100 a day?
Yeah, for 30 pigs. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to do some math there.
Yeah. Right. And so, or like a cow will eat, $2 to $3. The feeding cost for a cow is like $2 to $3 a day in the wintertime. So you start doing the math of like, every day I can keep that cow out of the corral and out of the feed bunk, I make $3 per head per day.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, well, now how else can I spend that money on infrastructure to develop winter watering systems so I can graze them more efficiently, fencing infrastructure so I can more effectively utilize forage, so I can do stockpile grazing? Can I plant trees that will drop nuts or pods at certain times of the year when the grass is dry so that they have an extra boost of protein or sugar so their rumen can better digest the forage? Like, that is a far better bang for your buck than buying a baler or a feed mill or a combine. You're not going to be able to pay for that even on thousands of acres. Honestly, it's crazy how, like, look up the price of organic feed in your area or whatever feed you're using, and then go look at the price of organic fertilizer or the fertilizer. It's almost the same price to get the same amount of nutrients. And so you could just buy grain, feed it to your chickens, get eggs and meat and all this other functions, and then you fertilize your pastures or your gardens or whatever it is. To me, that's where I focus. Now, again, the strategy of like, how do we create really cool foraging systems? That's fun. So, I've got videos of duckweed, and I talked about, mass trees or mulberries, depending on where you are, or persimmons or apples or caraganas. Like, there's so many different cool ways. One year I experimented with harvesting minnows from a pond and feeding that to my pigs and chickens. Like, that's super cool when you can start to literally harvest, $100 at a time out of a pond and feed it to your pigs or chickens. That's where those systems are really, really cost effective.
Fantastic. What a great answer.
Yeah.
Is there anything more? I'd like to talk about grains and one other aspect of raising animals and the relationship that we touched on. But do you have any more suggestions on basic and best value equipment and infrastructure for the animals? I know you talked about that.
Yeah.
Wait, yeah.
Yeah, really good question. So I would say every homestead needs some kind of a tractor, or I like tractors. I know there's skid steers, and a lot of people use those. To me, we've never had one growing up, so that might be part of my bias. Is I've run them, I know what they are, but to me, the way I've heard it said is that you need a skid steer to build a property, you need a tractor to maintain one, and I think that's fairly true. And so the every horsepower of equipment that you have, whether it's a water pump or a tractor or a grain elevator, whatever it is, every horsepower is the equivalent of 10 Olympic athletes working at their full capacity. So there's a video you can watch online. Type in Olympic athlete powers toaster, and he can't do it. An Olympic athlete cannot power a toaster. And that's like 700 watts. So when you think about that, we have a lot of different equipment, but on my current homestead, I've got like a little 25 horse tractor. And it's the equivalent of literally 250 athletes, Olympic little athletes that is in my garage right now, that at the turn of a key, I can go and lift, 1,000 pounds. I can pull 4,000. I can till, I can dig, I can haul, I can do all these different things. Having the appropriate tractor for a property, depending on how big your property is and the animals that you're going to be, because certain tractors can only lift a certain amount and stuff like that. And this is actually a big part of what I do in my mentorship is helping people buy the right equipment, because it's super overwhelming. Like, if you weren't, in the same way we're talking about like the calibers of Wright with 223 and 308, and like there's that times 1,000 when you get into agricultural equipment, because now there's different brands, and there's different kinds of PTOs and hydraulic valves and certain implements. And most homesteaders, if you weren't raised in that environment, they're not aware of the hundreds of years of inventions that have gone into creating incredible machines that are super cost effective, that can take hours and hours of drudgery and turn it into a 5-second job.
Mm-hmm.
And so another thing I say is, one of the best precious metals you can buy is iron. Yeah, one of the best precious metals you can buy is iron. And so when you buy a piece of equipment, whatever it is, whether it's an implement or a tractor or an excavator or whatever it is, if you can put that thing to productive use, you not only are you storing value. So as opposed to buying gold and silver, and again, I'm not saying don't buy them, but if you've got enough of that, put it towards precious equipment, iron, and now it's a store of value, but it's also helps you to build your property. So it helps you to increase your investment in another asset. It helps you to improve your quality of life, because now it takes a really difficult job or a job that would take forever, or would need a bunch of people, the labor would be cost prohibitive, and you can do it in a few seconds. Like, there's just so many benefits to it. And then if you ever need to sell it, you sell it, and it's probably easier to sell that piece of equipment, that iron, than it would be to sell gold.
Yes, right? Especially if the shit hit the fan.
Yeah. And so now where was it coming with that? So really thinking about like your context of like, okay, how much do you need to lift? How many, like, are you going to be getting round bales or small square bales? Because if you need a round bale, well, now you're like minimum 1,500 pounds. Okay, that's a certain kind of tractor or bigger. What else does it need to do? Does it need to mow or till or stuff like that? And then, you're going to buy new or used, or what's a good brand? What are easy to operate? Are your kids going to be using it? Or can it be something from the 60s that has, 3 levers that you got to shift around and hold your tongue just right? So yeah, there's a whole world in there, but I would say, you don't have to hire me for this. Find an old farmer in your area, take him out for coffee and ask him about equipment. You will make that man's day. He'll be the happiest guy ever. I guarantee you'll have to turn your phone off because you'll be getting so many ads on Kijiji of, what about this one? I think you should buy this. Farmers love spending other people's money. So, find a retired farmer in your area and tell him what you're looking for, or ask him what you should buy. He'll help you get the right equipment. He probably has 3 of them out back that he never uses that he'd give you 2 for a case of beer. And yeah, start playing with that. And like, I buy equipment all the time. Sometimes I'll buy 3 and just try the one out, all 3 of them out, and be like, okay, I like this one best, and then sell the other 2. Like it's so easy to exchange that stuff. Sometimes you got to sit on it for a month, but yeah, the quality of life piece, I can't underestimate that enough. Is so many homesteaders are like going back to the Stone Age, and it's just, it doesn't make any sense. These are and like, go and try to dig a hole like with a shovel, and then get in an excavator and just see what you can do with hydraulics. It is phenomenal, and it costs you, even if the price of fuel were to 100x, it would still be orders of magnitude cheaper than doing that manually. It is, the energy density and functionality of it is just phenomenal. So yeah, really the technology piece, which is, again, that's one of the orders of operations, but it's one of the last, I think it's second to last, just above soils. But it's really crucial. And it's not just, like engines and tractors and stuff like that. Power tools, electric power tools. I did another YouTube live on my channel where I kind of went into this in depth, but figuring out what tool platform you're going to go with, whether it's Makita or DeWalt or Milwaukee, based on what tools that they have and what jobs that you want to do. That is another life changer in terms of what you can do with like a few $1,000s of infrastructure. And I'd also like to point out, all of those things are tax write-offs if you're running a farm business. And so like, we don't pay taxes on our farm, and I'm not doing anything illegal or doing any tax evasion or anything like that. I just, whenever I make a money above the taxable threshold, I buy or invest in the next piece of capital or equipment that's going to most improve my quality of life. And that's it. And so we are very poor financially, but we are some of the wealthiest people in the world because my family's been doing this for generations. And that's how another big strategy that we try to teach people is to, your homestead can be a way to, if you're making income somewhere else, even if it's totally non-farm related, you can use that business to generate income. You can lose it into your farm business. And then at a certain point, when you don't need to capitalize it anymore, you stop working off farm and you just run on your farm. And now you can stay below the poverty threshold, but you're a millionaire.
There you go. Brilliant. Yeah, I'm a big fan of entrepreneurialism, and it is good because everything that you spend your money on, if you choose a business that is your life purpose, for example, then you're always going to be investing in your purpose. It's always going to feel fantastic. You're not going to be sad about spending that money. And then at the end of the day, if they rape you for taxes, you're in a much better position.
Exactly.
For that. Yeah, that's been my whole adult life right there.
Yeah.
So my accountant swears at me.
Totally. But like, there's a literally like a rule. Farmers don't pay taxes. I don't know any farmers who pay taxes. It's just because that's their life, and almost everything that they do is a tax write-off. Now, hopefully they don't change that and they don't get more stickly on it. But there's a lot of loopholes there that you don't have to go into the really complex trusts and all this other stuff. I just have a regular accountant. I pay him $500 a year, and that's it.
Do you mind if
Yeah.
I ask if you guys incorporated?
No, I don't. I'm a
Good.
sole proprietor. I don't like playing those games. It's just me, and my parents are their own person, and I have 4 or 5 different businesses that all just run through me personally. But it's great because I can make money in one aspect of my person, and I can invest it in another aspect. And then if at a certain point I've nowhere to, I'll start another thing. You know, I've got 10 other businesses I'd like to start before I die, and you know, as soon as the other ones are done, I start investing in those.
Brilliant. Yeah, and thanks for everything you shared about the equipment. I've been literally moved to tears seeing what can be done with equipment on the farm. Like like a girl, I'm in the back crying because
Yeah,
it's so like, oh wow.
it is amazing, and people don't get it. Like it is hard to, like, I always laugh. One of my favorite things is if you ever get an excavator out who's doing anything like a backhoe or something, and they're like moving dirt, and you watch them for a while, get down in the trench or in the hole with a shovel and try to do something. It's just funny. You just hop out. You can't even lift like a piece of wet clay like that and move it. And it's just, he's just doing it, just smoking a cigarette.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, fascinating. I'm loving this conversation so much. I think that's my animal questions at this point, but what's your take on growing grains small scale? What do you, is that realistic at all based on what you said about feed?
I mean, if I would say for human consumption, potentially,
Yeah.
like what I just did the math the other day.
I have 3 in mind: barley, oats, and I guess rice wouldn't fly here. Right? We're not in a rice.
You could do wild rice, but that's
Yeah.
a totally different ball game. So oats is going to be tricky because it has a hull. So does barley. So then you need a dehuller, unless you're getting a hullless oat and barley, which they do make those, but they're kind of hard to find. Yeah, on a small scale, if you're not doing a whole bunch, potentially, if you're trying to feed animals, that's where, again, like a pig will eat 3% of its body weight a day, pretty much. Or like a cow, like a 1,000-pound cow eats 30 pounds of hay a day. Right. So as soon as you start to like scythe that, or again, you can do it. People did it for thousands of years. I'm just saying, go run a scythe and then, you know, watch someone make a 1,500-pound bale in 30 seconds. And it's a totally different ball game. And I would also say, like, I don't think we're going back in that direction. I don't want to go back to the Stone Age. I have nothing against technology. I think there is appropriate levels of it. I still use hand tools. I love using hand tools. I have a scythe, but there's just certain jobs that I don't do that. We make our own hay. We used to grow. There's been years on our farm where the only thing we bought was a little bit of diesel, some baler twine, and some salt, and some equipment parts. We made all of our own grain. We did like 1,500 bushels of grain, a couple hundred bales of hay and straw. Like, we didn't buy anything. You can do it. Now, that took decades. Like, my dad grew up on a farm. He knew all those things. We bought used equipment, fixed them all up. We don't have any of that stuff anymore. We sold the combine. I don't do that anymore because I've just found it more effective to partner with a like-minded person in my community and work on the specialization and the trader principle. So I would say, yeah, you can do it on a small scale. You know, there are threshers and stuff like that there are a lot of hand tools you can use. But again, when you can buy, if there's a good grain grower in your area who's growing regenerative grain and crushing it and going to farmers markets, and you can buy a 50-pound bag of wheat kernels for, I don't know, $100, $200, you'd be far better off to put your life energy into something else that he doesn't do and to buy from that guy.
Yeah. It's one of the upsides of specialization is that, like you said before, that if you're only killing 2 animals a year, it's going to take you forever compared to someone who's doing that all day. So it's then you're back to community and different roles and skills that you need to.
Yeah, totally. And so, and that's where, there's multiple ways you can get resilience. Like, you can, I don't believe in self-sufficiency. I think it's a red herring in our community. I think it's about community interdependence and the specialization in trade. That has far more resilience. And you look at all these other small businesses, like if there's a small butcher in your area who isn't bending the knee, and like to build a new butcher shop now, that's federal, it has all the inspections and stuff. No one's doing it anymore because it is purposefully cost prohibitive. So all these old butcher shops are just legacied in, and they're skimping along, flying under the radar, and a lot of them are about to go under. Like that, how much more resilient are you and your community if you learn how to butcher your own meat, or if you help someone else continue on what they've spent their lifetime learning how to do? Now, again, I'm not saying don't, experiment with it as a hobby and, practice curing your own meats. You can surely do all that stuff. But if self-sufficiency is your goal, communities and relationships and specialization will actually get you there far faster than learning how to do all this stuff yourself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right with the red herring, and you just have to start going down the track and see what you're going to need next, and you're going to need next, and you're going to need next. It's just like, that's just not going to work. Certainly not nature's way.
No, and it's expensive. It's expensive. It's wasteful. It's not as efficient. It's also not as fun. Like,
right, exactly.
There's certain things, like I love growing my own garden, and I'm always going to grow my own garden. I would never grow vegetables for other people. I would hate it. But I love raising animals, and so I've scaled those things up because I like doing it. It fits in my wheelhouse, the feed, the other things, the milk. But it's not to say that I'm never going to garden. It's just that that's not going to be my business. It's a hobby. And so I always tell people, specialize before you diversify. So get really, really good at one thing first. And it might not be homestead related. It might be your current job. Just get really good at that. And then slowly start to invest. Okay, what's the next weak link? Or what's the next one thing that if everything else were to stay the same would have the greatest impact on my quality of life? I'm going to do that. And then get really good at that and specialize at that. And then do the next thing and then the next thing. And that, to me, when I shifted from, I came back to the farm and was like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to have honeybees. I'm going to have dairy cows. I'm going to plant trees. I'm going to do all this stuff. And it's totally self-sufficient. I burnt out in like 2 years. And I was young at that point. And now it's like, I've taken a totally other tact of like, it's the who, not how. I want to try to find the best people that can do whatever needs to be done. And then I'm going to be the best at whatever certain things that I'm, that my community also needs. And then you start to trade with those people. And that's fun.
Brilliant. Because it's all about the relationships. It's not just a cow that can't be alone around here.
Exactly. 100%. And it's sad because, I see, I can't tell you how many clients or farmer friends that I have, or homesteader, who, like, you have a conversation with them, you only see them once a year or whatever, even though you're close to each other, and they'll just be in tears by the end of it, or like, oh, man, we just got to do this more often. And so I really think we're coming back to that death cult. We're so afraid of like what might happen that we're losing the life that we have and what it could be. And we're spending all this time in the doom. And believe me, I've been black pilled. I know all the crazy, if you want to play conspiracy theory roulette, I'll play all day. I know how bad it is. I've gone down those rabbit holes. At the end of the day, it's like, okay, but what am I going to do about it? That's actually going to make a difference. And it's this kind of stuff. And so the only way to prepare for certain events is to prevent them from happening. And the only way to prevent them from happening, I believe, is to build this new economy, which is what we've been talking about. And so, if your life purpose is to raise animals or fruit trees or whatever it is, or garden, do that. Great. And I've got skills in that and I can help you do that. But if it's something else, do that. If you're a great economist or a researcher or a communicator or an educator with kids, like that, those are we need to rebuild all the layers of our current economic system, and we need far more than just people who can grow and raise animals. Now that's a wonderful thing, and as we've been talking about, the last 2 podcasts, it's super rewarding. I think everyone should have a garden. I think everyone should try to have, if you can, have a few animals that you raise and interact with, just because it's so rewarding to participate in those life cycles. But yeah, by no means am I a Luddite or a every man is an island kind of a guy. I don't think that's the way that we're going to get out of this mess that we're in.
Yeah, amen to that. I firmly believe what you're saying.
Yeah.
There was one question that was a little dangling from the animal thing, and it was based on some anecdotes from a farmer that had managed to get her animals to go to the slaughter willingly, and that obviously based on the relationship with them. So I think a lot of people are indoctrinated in whatever animals, that they have to force them, they have to scare them, they have to coerce them. We can see how well that works on us. When people try to coerce us, there's a whole lot of us that will push back, even if it's a right thing we're trying to be coerced for, never mind wrong things.
Yeah.
So do you want to we'll close on a topic on the relationship with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a YouTube channel. I think it's called A Beautiful Death on my YouTube channel, where I tell a story about a pig that I harvested years ago. And yeah, so I firmly believe in that. I believe that you can raise an animal in such a way that when you can ask, and that they will willingly give themselves to be harvested, and that's a beautiful relationship to have. And like, that's why the butcher that I interviewed before, he is the same. Like, every animal that we harvest, he says a prayer for them. I say my own thank yous. Like, it's not a, go to a rodeo, or go to an abattoir, or go to most conventional systems and see how they treat animals, or go to a hog barn, for God's sake, or for these chicken barns. You shouldn't be able to eat. You should be a vegan after you see those barns. And that's why I was a vegan for years, is I saw kind of how, even though I was raised in that other system, when I was away from the farm, I couldn't get meat like that. And I knew how the sausage was made, and I didn't want it. But that's not to say that it's bad. And so, when you do it right, it truly is a beautiful experience. And I've heard a lot of Indigenous people say this too, is that before they would go out on a hunt, they would pray and they would ask for the, whatever animal that they needed to show themselves. And quite often they would find it, right? And so, that is a firm belief that I have as well. And that's the ideal to work for in that system.
Yeah, very good. Oh man, what a great conversation this has been, Takota.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Really enjoyed it. Yeah. I'm not the primary farmer, but I sure love supporting farmers. And it's a beautiful thing to build relationships around too. There are things that we do at the farm. That this weekend was an example. We had 70-kilometer-an-hour winds while we're out there trying to get the last of the harvest out of the ground. Yeah. And I was trying to picture myself doing that alone. And it was just a big fat no. Like, I would have just left that stuff. Yeah. But for some reason, with the group of us working together and holding up the morale and joking around, and whoosh, the wave of sand would hit you in the face, or soil, or you like in your eyes and ears and throughout your hair and everything. And it's just, but yeah, the people in those relationships make it absolutely worth it. Of course, the thing on the other side, in a climate where we don't yet have to create our own food, it would be very easy to choose not to do that. But
it is such a great point. And I've had the same experience too, of just like, many hands make light work. And it is really rewarding to be a part of that's one of those synergistic effects, like where one extra person isn't as good as 2 people. It's like 4 people in terms of how much work you get done. And then you add 4 people is far more than 4 people's worth of work if it was just 4 individuals doing their own separate thing. So yeah, it is really important, and I think that same level of synergy happens with animals. Like when you are getting the animals to do the work that they love doing, like it's not drudgery for you, and you can. So if they're doing the spreading or the tilling or the weeding or the, I have another video on my channel called Gardening with Livestock, that goes through kind of a bunch of stories and systems that I built at our other farm. It's the same experience. So yeah, I just really encourage people to find some way to get back to this and participate in this kind of an ecosystem, not necessarily being a full-time farmer, but find some way to get your hands back in the dirt.
Nice. I love that. That's a great way to end this conversation. And do you want to share again with people how they could work with you? Is it one-on-one? Do you host any groups? Do you have courses? What do people generally do?
Yeah. So all of our links is on our website, buildingyourhomestead.com. There's free resources. We've got an online course that kind of goes through my book. You can also buy the book. It's on Audible, as well as physical copies on Amazon. We do one-on-one mentorship, which can be just one-off hourly calls, or we do retainer packages where you can buy 10 hours at a time for a discount, and then you can get access to, text or phone call or kind of almost 24/7 support if you need it. And then we also do full-on homestead design packages where if someone has raw land or they're looking to buy land, we can help them find land through the mentorship wing. Once they get it, we can help them design out all the elements on their property, or if there's certain infrastructure, we can work around what's already there based off of what your goals are, what you want, what the land wants, and kind of help you every step of the way from basically buying, designing, developing, and managing land pretty much anywhere in the world at this point.
Well, that would be comforting. You have a guide. The experience is gold, and I think what you said about going to find a farmer, not just to talk about his equipment, but there must be so many things that we lost in our grandparents whose lifestyle completely changed, and was made obsolete at the time. Boy, I miss them now. I just want you to say.
Yeah, it really was. And to be honest, that's probably one of the biggest recommendations I give the clients that I work with is in our conversations. There'll be a certain point where, like, they're struggling with a problem. I can't give them the answer because I don't have the context in that area, or it's just too complex. And so it's like, okay, go ask you. I know you know this person. Go ask this person if he knows anyone who would know the answer to this question. I guarantee he will. And when he gives you the answer, go talk to that guy and ask him, and he'll know. And it's fun to, like, help people connect these dots and find the skilled tradespeople. And once you get that kind of team on your side, again, that's where that true resiliency comes in. It's not in self-sufficiency, it's in community. And so, yeah, like we're doing a lot of stuff on our YouTube channel. We can do one-on-one hourly calls. We're starting a new thing we're going to try where it's like group calls, where, like, we've noticed there's a lot of homestead groups that, people that get together, whether they're a homeschool group or just kind of a group that does tours or something every so often. I've done a couple of them, but we want to do more of those to help make it more cost effective, where a group of people can book me for an hour and do kind of a Q&A like this, but it's more on a certain theme that they're struggling with, or stuff like that. So yeah, there's lots of free stuff as well. You definitely don't have to work with us one-on-one, but just get out there and do whatever you can to start building these lifeboats, because we need it.
Nice. I bet we're going to land on your doorstep for at least a tour.
Okay.
I have a feeling. Yeah.
Awesome.
I have a feeling. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today in the chat. I appreciate your comments there. Any reflections you have are always welcome. And Takota, all the best to you in this season to come. Does it slow down in the winter for you at all? I guess not with animals. That might be another thing, eh?
Yeah, we've got a few lulls, but we're just heading into our harvesting season. So we're going to be starting harvesting beef, and then the pork is kind of in, December, and February and March are slow. But yeah, we're not there yet.
Okay. At least you got a couple of slower months. So.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Coming up this week is a House of Free Will event. I'll just let people know quickly that Diana Stewart is going to be giving a talk on an extraordinary healing journey that she's been on. She is a Journey Code apprentice. That's my coaching certification training. She's my senior apprentice. She's been working for a long time, and she's put these talks together that are actually riveting. You're going to sit on the edge of your seat hearing what she's been through and how she got to the other side and how she now helps people. That is behind the private wall. So you need to apply to be a member of the House of Free Will. You can click the link that is there in the show notes below, or just reach out to me somehow. Beth@bethmartins.com would work, or my website. The tickets there are good, and it's totally free to members, but you need to be a member first. So if anyone's interested, feel free to let me know. And maybe Takota, if you're open to it, you could come to do a workshop for us sometime.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about it.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Okay, have a beautiful rest of your day, everyone. And do reach out to Takota if you have questions and want more guidance on this subject. I think it's really been incredible to connect with you.
Thanks so much, Beth.
Okay, you're very welcome. Bye, everyone.